You open your eyes, and instantly you know something is wrong, not because of pain or fear, but because the world feels older, slower, quieter in some ways, louder in others. You're lying on a stiff bed in a small upstairs room, and the first thing you notice is the smell dust, old wood, and a faint sweetness, like syrup dried long ago. Faded wallpaper curls at the edges. A fan in the corner ticks lazily, humming as it turns. Outside the open window, you hear the rumble of engines, but they don't sound like the sharp growl of modern cars. They're deeper, heavier, like metal beasts dragging themselves over the road. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and stand up, your bare feet meeting warm wooden boards. You walk to the window and part the thin curtains. Below you, a street stretches out, but it isn't lined with glass towers or neon signs. Instead, you see rounded automobiles with chrome grilles and wide white wall tires. Men in hats and suspenders, women in dresses that fall past the knee, hair pinned carefully, handbags hooked over their arms. Signs painted on brick and hung atop storefronts shout in thick lettering: drugs, soda fountain, tonics, elixirs, refreshments. For a moment, you could almost convince yourself you've stepped into an old movie. The scene has that soft, sepia tone feel of a time that only exists in history books and myths. But as your eyes focus, you realize something else. There are advertisements everywhere. Big, bold posters splashed across walls. Painted signs in windows. Hand-lettered boards on stands along the sidewalks. Pictures of smiling children, laughing families, and clear glass bottles filled with fizzing liquid. The words jump out at you again and again. Refresh your nerves. Good for digestion. Tonic for the brain and body. For happy, healthy children. You blink slowly. Soda for nerves. A drink for your mood. At first, you assume you're misreading. Maybe it's just clever wording. But the more you look, the more obvious it becomes. In this version of America, somewhere in the early to mid-20th century, people don't just drink soda for fun. They drink it like medicine. They drink it because they believe it keeps them balanced, healthy, calm, and happy. You head downstairs and step out into the street. The air is thick with a blend of exhaust, tobacco smoke, and that's strange, sugary tang that seems to float out of every doorway that has a soda sign on it. Even the light feels different, softer, a little hazy, as if the world itself hasn't quite sharpened into the high-definition reality Ray used to. You watch as a young mother exits a corner drugstore. She's holding the hand of a little boy, maybe 6 years old, his hair neatly combed, shoes shine. In her other hand, she carries a cardboard holder with several glass bottles clinking together. She kneels down, smiles, and twists off one of the caps with a small tool. The bottle hisses softly as carbonation escapes. She hands it to the boy with the same gentle pride you might expect from someone serving a homemade meal or handing over a carefully chosen treat. Drink up, she says cheerfully. It'll make you feel good. The boy takes a deep gulp. The way he drinks is familiar, like any child enjoying something sweet, but there is a difference in how the mother watches him. Not wary, not guilty, not worried about sugar or additives, but satisfied, comforted, almost reassured, as if she has just done something good for his health. You keep walking, trying to place the exact year. There are no smartphones, no digital screens, just newspapers, radios behind windows, and big bold fonts promising miracles in bottles. A delivery truck rumbles past, painted with an enormous logo for a lemon lime soda. The tagline reads, "Good for body and mind." That line sticks with you. You pass a window with an old-fashioned doctor's office sign painted on it. Drive, Harrison General Practice. On a whim, you pause as the door opens and an older man in a suit steps out. Shaking hands with a patient, you catch fragments of their conversation. Nerves seem frayed. The doctor says, his voice calm, "Try one of those lithiated sodas daily. They do wonders for mood. Gentle, safe, helps keep the spirits balanced." He says it casually, like recommending more sleep or a walk in fresh air. The patient nods gratefully, as though having been given careful, scientific advice. "Thank you, doctor. I'll do that. Lithiated sodas. You've heard the stories in your world, the strange, almost unbelievable bits of history that sound like conspiracy theories until you dig deeper. Coca-Cola with cocaine, cough syrups loaded with opiates, and yes, lemon lime sodas that once contained lithium salts lithium, as in the same element used today in psychiatric medication. But here, you're not reading it in a detached article or watching a documentary. You're walking through the living version of it. You race seeing it as it was experienced by people who had no idea how future generations would react to their health drinks. You cross the street and step into a drugstore. It's smaller than modern pharmacies, but somehow more crowded. Wooden shelves stacked with brown glass bottles, metal tins, and boxes decorated with ornate typography. At the back is a long counter with round stools and chrome edges. The soda fountain. A teenager in a white shirt and apron wipes the counter, smiling as two children swing their legs on tall stools, sipping from glass tumblers filled with pale, fizzy liquid. Behind the counter, a row of taps, syrups, and bottles gleam. Names jump out at you: root beer, cola, cherry phosphate, and then that word again, lithiated. On a colorful sign above the fountain, a cheerful slogan: "Smooth your nerves, lift your spirits, try our lithiated lemon lime today." You sit at an empty stool, listening. A woman beside you talks to the soda jerk, complaining about her husband's temper and her own headaches. He recommends she try a glass or two of the good stuff each day. "Keeps you balanced," he says, as if he's reciting a truth that everyone accepts. You consider how different this is from the world you know. In your time, people hover anxiously over labels. They search ingredient names on their phones. They debate artificial sweeteners and preservatives. They argue about sugar taxes and warning labels. Words like chemicals and additives are spoken with suspicion, fear, or frustration. But here, chemistry is exciting, modern, magical. Nobody is Googling side effects. Nobody is reading a multi-page PDF about drug interactions. They simply trust. Trust the doctor. Trust the pharmacist. Trust the company that prints healthful on the label. You look around the room and realize something important. To these people, you're the strange one. You're the anxious, suspicious, overly cautious outsider who sees poison where they see progress. They grew up in a world where medicine and treat often blurred together, where you could buy nerve tonics at the same counter that sold ice cream and cough drops, where putting something medicinal into a soft drink wasn't sinister. It was smart branding. You imagine explaining to them what you know about lithium from your own era, how it's carefully dosed for people with bipolar disorder, how blood levels are tested to prevent toxicity, How doctors warn about tremors, kidney impacts, and thyroid changes. How nobody would casually slip it into a children's beverage now. You can almost see the bewildered looks, the polite confusion, but it helps, doesn't it? They might say. It steadies the mood, so why not in the drink? It's just a little bit, and besides, they might gesture to the smiling faces on the posters. Look how happy everyone is. You watch a little girl at the counter. She's maybe 8. She's giggling with her brother, both of them sipping from tall glasses with striped straws. Their mother sits nearby, relieved to have a quiet moment. Maybe yesterday the girl had a tantrum. Maybe the boy was restless, anxious, up half the night. Maybe someone told the mother, "Try this soda, it helps calm them." It's modern, it's scientific, and now, here they are, sweetness on their tongues, bubbles on their lips, lithium quietly flowing into their small bodies. The mother sighs with contentment. The children smile and swing their legs. The soda jerk dries a glass, humming to himself. The drugstore radio crackles in the background, playing soft music. Everything looks peaceful, and that's the unsettling part. It doesn't look evil. It doesn't look like a science fiction lab or a dystopian experiment. It looks ordinary, comfortable, normal. It's just a Tuesday in the town where people drink their medicine through a straw and call it a treat. You begin to grasp the deeper reality of this world. It's not that literally every child in America is on lithium every single day in a precise, measurable way. It's that the culture treats mood-altering ingredients as casual, friendly, and unremarkable. That children, adults, the elderly, anyone might be sipping something psychoactive without any real understanding of what it is doing to them over months and years. You step back outside, letting the door swing shut behind you. The bell jingles. More people are coming in. More children tug at sleeves, asking for a drink. Deliverymen unload crates of glass bottles from a truck. On each bottle, that same bright, hopeful language, uplift, refreshment, balanced mood. As you walk down the sidewalk, taking it all in, a strange thought crosses your mind. This isn't just a story about the past. It's also a mirror held up to the present, because in your own era, people still line up for substances that affect mood, focus, energy, and sleep. They just call them different names: energy drinks, supplements, over-the-counter pills, natural boosters. The labels have changed, the style has evolved, the fears have shifted from lift I am to sugar, from sugar to caffeine, from caffeine to something else. But the desire remains the same. A quick fix in a bottle, relief on demand, calm in a can, happiness in a few gulps. Here, in this older America, that desire is wrapped in a more innocent trust. People truly believe they've found a miracle in their fizzy drinks. They aren't looking for a catch. They aren't waiting for the lawsuit, the scandal, the documentary that will expose what was really in those bottles. That part hasn't been written yet. You stop at a street corner and look up at a large painted billboard. A row of children sit in a neat line, each holding a bottle of lemon lime soda. They're laughing, perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect smiles. The slogan arches above them like a blessing for brighter moods and happier children. You read it again, slower this time. Brighter moods, happier children in your world. Those phrases would belong to therapists, teachers, families, and carefully regulated medication. Here, they belong to a drink. You realize that you have woken up in an America where chemistry is already quietly shaping childhood, but no one has yet learned to be afraid of it. An America that pours mood-altering compounds over ice, adds a slice of lemon, and calls it refreshment, an America where, without really meaning to, a generation is growing up with lithium-infused lemon-lime smiles. The cars pass by, a dog barks in the distance. Somewhere, a church bell rings the hour. Life goes on as usual in this world, unaware of how history will one day look back in disbelief and say, wait, they gave lithium to kids in soda. You stand there on the sidewalk, feeling that eerie mixture of calm and horror that comes from realizing you're watching something quietly dangerous wrapped in the most ordinary of routines. And as children race past you with bottles clinking in their hands, you understand the unsettling truth. In this version of America, medicine doesn't come with warnings, barcodes, and consent forms. It comes with bubbles, bright green labels, and the promise that you'll feel just a little bit better if you take another sip. You keep walking, letting the street carry you forward, until one particular sign snaps into focus like a lens being adjusted. Bright green letters, crisp white background, a diagonal red slash, a familiar logo you recognize instantly from your own time. 7-Up, except here, in this older America, it doesn't look quite the same. The topography is slightly different, the design a little more ornate, and beneath the bold name, you see smaller lettering that makes your modern stomach twist. Bib label lithiated lemon lime soda. You stop dead on the sidewalk. In your world, 7-Up is just a harmless lemon lime soda. Something people grab at barbecues, drink with pizza, pour over ice on hot days. Nobody thinks of it as medicine. Nobody imagines it as part of a psychiatric treatment plan. It's just soda. But here, in this version of the past, the drink's original identity isn't hiding. It's proudly displayed. Lithiated. Lithium inside. The bottle and the painted poster shows a clear liquid. Bubbles rising. Condensation beating on the glass. Above it, a cheerful line reads, "Takes the gloom out of your doom." You step closer, as if that might change what you're reading. It doesn't. You wander into the nearest shop of grocers mixed with a small drug counter. Wooden shelves line the walls, stocked with canned goods, jars, and bottles. Near the front, ranged neatly in the crate, you see them, real, physical bottles of that early 7-Up. The label is busy but confident, boasting of its refreshing, uplifting qualities. The word lithiated sits there without apology, like it's just another nice featured adjective. Frosted, sparkling, lithiated. You pick up a bottle, feeling its cool weight in your hand. The glass is thick, meant to be reused. The cap is tight and unbroken. The logo looks almost playful, not serious or medical. And yet, you know what's truly inside this glass. Not just sugar and flavoring and fizz, but lithium citrate, a compound you associate with mood stabilizers in modern psychiatry. Back in your own time, lithium is a serious, controlled medication. It's prescribed for people with bipolar disorder, sometimes for severe depression. Doses are strictly monitored, blood levels are checked, doctors warn about tremors, kidney stress, thyroid issues, weight gain, and toxicity. Too little, and it doesn't help too much, and it can poison you. It's not something anyone takes lightly, but here, the same basic element is dissolved into a sweet lemon lime drink you can buy with pocket change. No questions asked. You set the bottle back gently, almost as if it might explode. A young man behind the counter notices you looking. Good choice, he says, nodding at the crate. That new lemon lime's all the rage. Lifts the spirits. Folks say it helps when they're feeling low. You know, you murmur something non-committal, and he continues, clearly proud to repeat what he's heard. Got lithium in it. Modern science, they call it. Helps with the nerves. Perfect for busy days. Doctor down the road swears by it. You imagine the doctor. White coat and confidence, reassuring his patients with a friendly chuckle. Oh yes, it has lithium in it. They're using that for mood problems now. Just drink a little every day. Completely safe. And the patients nod. Because why wouldn't they? Lithium, to them, isn't yet framed as a potent psychiatric drug requiring careful oversight. It's framed as a modern mineral, a clever additive, a helpful ingredient. Just one more marvel in an age racing to bottle answers to every problem. You step back outside, letting the door close behind you. The light feels a little harsher now that you know what you're looking at. Everywhere, you start to spot more signs you hadn't focused on before. Ads that mention nerves, mood swings, temperament. Phrases like cheerfulness in every bottle and for steadier spirits. You realize something important. This isn't just about taste or flavor innovation. It's about mood engineering disguised as refreshment. In the early 1900s, before strict drug regulation and widespread awareness, the line between pharmaceuticals and beverages was startlingly thin. Patent medicines boasted secret formulas. Coca-Cola had once famously contained cocaine. Cough syrups were heavy with opiates. And here, a lemon lime soda launches into the world wearing a bib label and lithium salts like they ray. Fashionable accessories. You imagine the boardroom conversations that may have birthed this drink. Men in suits, excited by modern chemistry, talking about how to make a product stand out in a crowded market. Everyone has fizzy drinks. We need something more. What if it doesn't just taste good? What if it makes people feel good? People are tired, stressed, nerves shot after the war, the economy, the pace of life. Well, there's this element, lithium. They say it calms people, evens out moods. Perfect at it. Put it right in the bottle. We'll be the soda that smiles for you. And just like that, a psychiatric agent becomes a selling point. On a nearby wall, a poster shows a woman in a tidy dress, eyes bright, holding a bottle of 7-Up. The copy assures you that it is excellent for invalids and those of delicate nerves. It doesn't sound like the bold, sports-focused marketing of modern sodas. It sounds like something halfway between a dessert and a prescription. There are no disclaimers. No ask your doctor if this is right for you. No tiny paragraph of side effects racing by in fine print. Just an easy emotional promise. Drink this, feel better. You follow the street until you find yourself outside a doctor's waiting room. Through the windows, you see tired faces. A woman rubbing her temples. A man with slumped shoulders. A teenager staring at the floor. The receptionist stands behind the small counter, and as patients leave, she hands out small slips of paper recommendations, remedies, tips. You picture what one of those slips might say. Rest as much as possible. Avoid overexertion. Try a glass of lithiated soda daily to maintain calmness and lift mood in your mind. A modern psychiatrist flinches. Here, though, it's progressive, advanced. The doctor isn't trying to harm anyone. In fact, he believes he's helping, using the tools and ideas available in its time. The full risks aren't understood. The long-term data doesn't exist. There are no ethical committees, no double-blind trials, no decades of cautionary studies yet. It's not a villainous plot. It's an experiment being conducted on an entire population without anyone calling it that. You think about how it actually works inside the body. Lithium doesn't slam the brain like a narcotic. It doesn't intoxicate like alcohol or sedate like a strong tranquilizer. Instead, it slowly tweaks the delicate balance of mood regulation, smoothing some of the peaks and valleys, blunting extremes. That's why it helps people with severe mood disorders. But that's also why pouring it casually into soda is so unsettling. If a child is naturally energetic, fidgety, prone to emotional ups and downs, what does it mean if their daily drink quietly nudges their nervous system toward a flatter state? If a parent, exhausted and overwhelmed, notices that their child is a little calmer after their favorite lemon-lime soda, does anyone wonder why? Or do they just buy more? Picture a glass bottle sitting on the kitchen table, frosted from the cold, beads of condensation running down its sides, labeled bright and cheerful, promising refreshment, balance, maybe even a better mood. To most people at the time, it was just another part of daily life lined up on grocery shelves, tucked into ice chests at picnics, shared at family gatherings. Nothing about it screamed danger. No skull-land crossbones, no black box warning, no whispered warnings in the neighborhood. Now imagine someone, decades later, looking back at that same bottle with a shiver, realizing that what seemed harmless was anything but. That gap between what people thought they were doing and what they were actually doing is where the real weight of this story lives. Because the most unsettling part isn't he just that a powerful mood-altering substance ended up in a soft drink. It's that almost nobody truly understood what that meant. For parents, it was just something that helped with the nerves, a modern aid in an increasingly stressful world. For kids, it was just a treat. For companies, it was a selling point. For advertisers, it was a story, a miracle of science, harnessed for everyday life. Day after day, sip after sip, an entire generation participated in an unspoken experiment without ever being told. It was an experiment at all. And that's the kind of thing that doesn't just disappear when the recipe changes. It leaves echoes. When the lithium quietly disappeared from the formula, there was no grand public reckoning, no mass apology, no nationwide campaign explaining, "We gave you something that probably shouldn't have been so casual." It simply faded out, replaced with new formulations, new slogans, new flavors. The brand continued, the product evolved, time marched on, but the pattern remained. The pattern that says, if we can turn chemistry into comfort, people will buy it. If we wrap powerful effects in friendly packaging, people will trust it. If enough people are doing it, it stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like normal life. The story of that lithium-laced soda becomes a kind of mirror held up to our wider relationship with substances, brands, and authority. It forces us to ask questions that go far beyond one drink or one era. How many other times have people lined up for something because it was advertised, approved, and available only to find out later that the full story was never really told? How many times has a culture mistaken widespread use for genuine safety? The unsettling truth is that history is full of these quiet experiments no one voted on. Lead in gasoline, cigarettes marketed by doctors, certain pesticides sprayed over fields and neighborhoods, drugs once hailed as miracles, later pulled from shelves in embarrassment. In each case, there was a period where they weren't fringe, weren't taboo, they were normal. They lived in that same innocent seeming space as a soda bottle in a fridge, part of the background of daily life, emotionally associated with progress, convenience, or relief. The Lithium story sits among them as one more reminder that everyone that's doing it has never been a reliable safety test. And there's another layer: the way stories get rewritten afterward. Once people realize something was harmful, there's a tendency to simplify the past. They didn't know any better. It was a different time. They were naive. That explanation is soothing, but it misses something important. People back then weren't stupid. They were human, and they were influenced by the same forces that still shape behavior now. Trust in experts, desire for comfort, faith in progress, fear of being the odd one out. In that sense, the story of kids drinking lithium soda isn't just a weird historical footnote. It is a case study in how easy it is for a whole society to step into a dangerous pattern with a smile, simply because it's well packaged and widely accepted. You can almost imagine someone, years later, sitting at their kitchen table, reading a short article or hearing a comment about what was once in that drink. They pause, thinking back to their childhood, those bottles on the counter, their parents' voices saying, "Have one, it's good for you." The way everyone laughed and clinked glass. And then comes that slow, heavy realization. We had no idea what we were actually doing. That realization can trigger to very different responses. One is denial. It couldn't have been that bad. If it were truly dangerous, someone would have stopped it sooner. It's not a big deal. We turned out fine. That's a protective reflex, a way of defending not just the past, but your own memories, your parents, your culture. The other response is quieter, more uncomfortable, and ultimately more useful. It sounds like this: if they could be wrong then, we could be wrong now. If they didn't see the full picture, maybe there are things we don't see either. That second response is where this story really matters, because the point isn't to sit in judgment of the past. The point is to recognize that the same ingredients that made that mistake possible, trust, convenience, authority, marketing, still exist now. They just wear different labels. Lithium and soda may be gone, but the mindset that allowed it to flourish can show up in 1,000 small ways. The pill you're told is perfectly safe. The food additive you never read about because it's buried in tiny print. The app you're assured is good for focus, even though it slowly rewires your attention. The drink, the snack, the screen, the supplement, the trend you're told will help you relax, smooth your edges, take the stress out of your day. Not all of these are dangerous. Not all of them are sinister. But the Lithium story asks you to treat every new solution with just a bit more curiosity than people did back then. It whispers, don't just ask, does this make me feel better right now? Ask, what is this training me to rely on? What belief about myself is this reinforcing? Who benefits if I become dependent on this? It also invites a more personal kind of reflection. If a previous generation was quietly taught that their mood, their nerves, their emotional swings could be smoothed by something in a bottle, then what have you been quietly taught? Maybe it's that rest requires stimulation. That boredom must be instantly fixed by scrolling. That sadness must be instantly softened by consumption. That stress must be instantly numbed, not understood. In that sense, the lithium-laced soda becomes less of a strange relic and more of a symbol, a reminder that any culture, at any time, can normalize things that later turn out to be deeply misaligned with human well-being. It's easy to think we know better now, but the more honest, humbling thought is, we might know better now in some ways and still be blind in others. The story doesn't end with the last bottle leaving the shelf. Its afterlife lives on in the questions it leaves behind. How do we treat our own nervous systems? Do we respect them, listen to them, work with them? Or do we try to push them into compliance with whatever the world demands by any means that's cheap, convenient, and available? In the end, that's what makes this such a quietly haunting chapter of history. Not that a drink once contained lithium, but that millions of ordinary people, loving parents, tired workers, hopeful consumers were doing what they thought was normal, safe, even responsible, while unknowingly participating in a vast, unspoken trial. It's a reminder that normal is not the same thing as wise, and that the most important warning labels in life aren't the ones printed on bottles. They're the ones we learn to write in our own minds. Pause, ask questions, look twice, even when everyone else only looks once. And never forget that convenience, comfort, and calm can sometimes carry a cost that isn't visible until years later. When someone finally picks up an old bottle, reads the fine print, and whispers, "I can't believe we drank this."
You imagine a family dinner table. The father comes home from a long day, nervous and tempered. The mother is frazzled, the children loud. Bottles of lithiated soda are opened and poured. The bubbles crackle in the glass. They drink, they breathe, and gradually the rough edges seem to soften just a little. Nobody calls it medicating. They call it having a nice drink. That's the disturbing beauty of how this product fits into its time. It doesn't need a prescription pad. It doesn't need a diagnosis. It doesn't even need an explanation. It just needs a tagline, a lift for your spirits. And behind that tagline sits Lithium, working quietly. You wander further, and at some point you see something subtle but telling. A newspaper clipping in a shop window, small and half forgotten, mentioning medical debates about lithium salts, their uses, their potential. Not everyone is fully comfortable with the idea. Some scientists somewhere are raising questions, but their caution is drowned out by the sound of clinking bottles and cash drawers slamming shut. The demand is too convenient, the promise too enticing. A mood-brightening drink in an uncertain world is hard to resist. You know from your own time that eventually the lithium disappears from 7-Up. The company quietly drops the lithiated branding. The world moves on. Regulations tighten. People start to care more about what's inside their food and drinks. New laws require clearer labeling. Lithium slips back into the realm of prescription medicine, where doses are checked, side effects monitored, and consent is informed. But standing here in this earlier America, you are witnessing that strange liminal phase when it wasn't yet clear which direction things would go. Soda companies were still inventing themselves. Medicine and flavor still danced together freely. The rules hadn't been written, so 7-Up didn't begin as just a lemon lime soda. It began as an idea that you could bottle emotional balance and sell it as a refreshing treat. The secret behind the cheerful glass you de-recognize so easily in your own world. Before it became a simple mixer for parties and a thirst quencher on hot afternoons, it was an experiment in mass mood management. A drink that blurred the boundary between fun and treatment. You glance once more at a passing delivery truck, its sides painted with the old logo, label lithiated lemon lime soda. The driver whistles as he goes, delivering cases of bubbling, mood-altering refreshment to homes, shops, hospitals and bars. Nobody on the street looks alarmed. Nobody protests. Children wave as the truck passes, eager for the next chill bottle to touch their lips. You, watching from a future where lithium is locked behind prescriptions, understand what they don't. That history is quietly being written in every swallow, every advertisement, every casual recommendation, and all of it began with this. The birth of a drink that didn't just promised to quench thirst, but to smooth out the rough edges of the human mind, one fizzy lemon lime sip at a time.
You step back from the delivery wagon, from the painted glass bottles and cheerful slogans, and let your eyes follow the people instead. Because if you really want to understand what this lithiated lemon lime world is doing, you can't just stare at the labels. You have to watch the routines, the habits, the tiny, quiet rituals that repeat every day until they shape an entire generation without ever announcing themselves. It starts small, almost invisible. A mother in a modest dress stands at her kitchen sink, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned back in haste. She's already been awake for hours cooking, scrubbing, wrestling with laundry that never ends and children that never stop. Her youngest has been particularly difficult lately. Tantrums, restless nights, big feelings in a small body. The kind of behavior that today might get described with acronyms and diagnoses. Back here, people just call it nervy, high-strung, or difficult. On the counter beside her, beads of condensation roll slowly down a glass bottle of lithiated lemon lime soda. She hesitates for a second, then pours a small glass and sets it at the table where her child sits. Still pouting, still wound tight from some earlier frustration. "Go on," she says gently. "This will help your nerves. It'll make you feel better." The child doesn't know anything about lithium. They don't know what nerves are in a medical sense. They just know that this fizzy drink is sweet and grown up and somehow special. Their little hands wrap around the glass. They sip, watch the bubbles tickle their tongue, and feel if not an instant chemical shift then at least a soft placebo comfort. That comes from a mother as confidence. In that moment, something important happens. A connection is forged between a beverage and emotional regulation. Between "I don't feel okay" and "I drink this to feel better." The child doesn't have the vocabulary to name it, but the pattern is sinking in all the same. You wander through the neighborhood and notice how often this pattern repeats in different forms. In one home, a father returns from work with a throbbing head, shoulders tight, patience worn thin by a day of noise, orders, and small humiliations. Instead of snapping at his family, He walks to the icebox, pulls out a chilled bottle of lithiated soda, and lets the caps open. He drinks slowly, each swallow a small pause, a minor reset. He doesn't think, "I'm self-medicating with a mood stabilizer," because nobody has framed it that way yet. He just thinks, "This settles me. This calms my nerves." This is what modern people do when they're strained. In another home, a teenage girl lies on her bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling emotions too large for her small room. The world is changing. Expectations press down on her from every direction. Maybe she's been told she's too moody, too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. Her mother knocks on the door, sets a glass down on the bedside table, and says something like, "Have a sip of this. It's good for the nerves." You know, by the time that girl is grown, she will reach for the same bottle automatically when her own children are restless. Habits cascade like that, quietly, over time. You start to see it everywhere, the normalization of chemical mood management. Through everyday pleasure, even the advertisements lean into this. On billboards and in newspapers, the drink isn't just sold as refreshing or delicious. It's marketed as balancing, soothing, good for temper, for nerves, for digestion, for gloom. The language isn't clinical, but it's close enough to suggest health, stability, and moral improvement. Keep your family even-tempered, one slogan might say, helps maintain a cheerful disposition. Another insists, perfect for children, ladies, and men of business. Almost every line is, in modern terms, a hint at mood. What's most unsettling isn't that the drink contains lithium that's already disturbing enough. It's that this chemical is entering bodies as part of casual, unexamined routine. It's not your doctor sitting across from you, explaining trade-offs, risks, benefits, and alternatives. It's a grocery purchase, a habit, a treat, a household staple. You imagine a typical grocery list in this world. Flour, sugar, coffee, bacon, vegetables, soap, 7-Up. One of these items is quietly altering the brain chemistry of everyone who drinks it. You walk down the street and notice children playing on the sidewalk, bottles clutched in their small hands, sipping between games. To them, this is just a fun drink. They don't know that lithium, in modern times, is usually measured in milligrams with blood tests and cautious doctors keeping watch. No one has told them that the same element is used to treat intense mood disorders. It's simply that lemon lime drink mom likes. You wonder how many of these kids were already naturally calm, and how many would have grown into intense, dramatic, emotional personalities if not smoothed out a little bit by this slow background influence. Not zombified, not knocked out, just subtly nudged toward a flatter emotional landscape. How many creatively wild children became slightly more compliant? How many anxious kids felt just enough quieting to keep them from acting out, but not enough for anyone to notice that something deeper was being altered? And on the flip side, you wonder how many children or adults experienced side effects nobody knew to connect to their favorite soda. Tremors, subtle cognitive dulling, fatigue, digestive issues, or the early signs of toxicity that, in a modern clinic, would set off alarms. Here, such symptoms are just a weak constitution, or getting older, or being run down. When a whole society is drinking the same medicated beverage, the baseline shifts, and nobody has a clean control group to compare themselves against. Inside a schoolroom, you see another ripple effect. The teacher, exasperated with the noise and fidgeting, jokes to a colleague that the new lemon lime tonic works wonders at home, that her own children sit more quietly after a glass at supper. She isn't lying, she's observing cause and effect, but she doesn't possess the framework to ask if those effects should be left to a doctor. Not a soft drink. Some families will buy it more, some less, but the net result is an emotional culture with a different textural world where reaching for a fizzy drink when you feel out of sorts is not just about the sugar high or the pleasant coldness, but about a low constant hum of chemical influence. You follow the chain of consequences outward. At the pharmacy counter, 7-Up sits alongside tonics, bitters, and syrups. It is part of a larger pattern, a culture that is increasingly eager to swallow something to manage discomfort. Headaches, sadness, nerves, fatigue. There's always a bottle, a powder, a syrup, a soda. Some contain opiates, some alcohol, some cocaine, and here, lithium. The idea that your feelings should always be quickly eased becomes normalized, not through sinister conspiracy, but through convenience and marketing and human desire to feel better without too much effort. In that context, a lithiated soda fits like a puzzle piece. At the same time, there is another layer you can ignore, the absence of consent in any meaningful sense. Children can't give informed consent. Most adults in this period wouldn't recognize lithium as a serious psychiatric agent in need of careful monitoring. They have no way to weigh long-term neurological risks against the immediate calming effect, because those risks haven't been clearly defined. They're participating in a population-wide experiment without knowing the word experiment applies. Is there malice here? Not exactly. There's something in some ways more chilling, a deep, sincere confidence in progress and chemistry, in the modern idea that if something can be bottled and sold, it must be good. You stand in front of a movie theater that is just beginning to show advertisements. Before the feature, one of them is animated, bright citrus slices dancing, bubbles rising. A smiling family at a dinner table, the father laughing instead of yelling, the children calm instead of crying, the mother relaxed instead of overwhelmed. The message isn't subtle at all. Once you really see it, life is easier when everyone drinks this. And this is how generational patterns are born. Children grow up associating emotional ease with a branded liquid. They step into adulthood and keep buying it without question. They raise their own children in the same pattern. By the time someone finally realizes that lithium in soda is inappropriate, the habit has already carved deep grooves into daily life. The company will eventually pivot. The formula will change. The lithiated identity will quietly disappear, leaving behind the lemon lime soda that's just a soft drink again. Future generations will sip it with no idea that it was once part of a mass mood adjustment trend. But if you freeze the frame right here, in this moment of history, what you see is stark. An entire country casually dosing itself, including its children, with a psychiatric agent through the medium of a cheerful, bubbly drink, not as a rare treatment for severe illness, but as a normal part of daily routine picnics, lunches, school breaks, family dinners. And the most haunting part isn't the chemistry, it's the silence. No warnings on the label, no conversations at the dinner table, no awareness strong enough to push back. Just the sound of bottle caps popping, glasses clinking, and advertisements promising that if you're feeling stressed, irritable, or low, the answer is simple: drink more. You step back into your own time with that realization echoing in your mind. There was a moment in American history when ordinary families' entire childhoods and collective emotional habits were shaped not just by culture, parenting, and hardship, but by something quietly dissolved in lemon lime fizz, not by accident, by design. You're standing in the aisle of a mid-century American grocery store, but you don't realize yet that you're inside a chemistry experiment. The floor is polished, the shelving is neatly stacked, and everywhere you look there are labels shouting reassurance. Pure, refreshing, healthful, modern. On one shelf sits a neat row of familiar glass bottles, their lemon-lime logos bright and cheerful, the slogans promising not only flavor, but something more: calm, relief, balance, good for the nerves. Nobody round you looks suspicious. A mother compares prices with a tired patience. A father in a work shirt grabs bread, coffee, canned meat. A child tugs at a sleeve and points eagerly toward the soda section. To them, this isn't a dangerous space. It's a showcase of progress. Groceries in neat rows, medicine in tidy bottles, sodas in ice-cold cases. Everything clean, civilized, handled. What almost no one fully understands is how thin the line really is between food and drug here, and how easily companies, regulators, and consumers are allowing that line to blur. Lithium isn't arriving in America as some mysterious foreign toxin. It isn't banned, whispered about, or treated as something inherently wicked. In fact, in the medical world of the early and mid-20th century, lithium exists in the gray zone, known in some circles as potentially calming, possibly helpful for certain nervous conditions, may be useful, may be risky, but certainly not treated with the reverence and caution it will one day command. There is no internet, no viral exposes. Information moves slowly through journals, conferences, word of mouth, and advertising campaigns that selectively simplify whatever serves the product best. A handful of doctors, scientists, and skeptical observers raise quiet concerns, but their voices are small and often drowned out by louder, more profitable optimism. From a regulatory standpoint, this period is a maze of half-formed rules and evolving standards. Food and drug oversight exists, but it's fragmented and far from the strict, skeptical structure you might imagine. New products rise faster than regulators can fully analyze them. Marketing often gets out ahead of science. Companies learn quickly that as long as a substance can be framed as a tonic, a nerve aid, or a digestive helper, it stands a better chance of sliding through under the banner of health rather than hazard. Lithium, mixed into a sweet, fizzy drink, looks harmless enough on paper. It's not heroin. It's not morphine. It's not alcohol. It's not a substance that makes people stagger or slur. It doesn't produce wild euphoria or obvious intoxication. It works quietly, subtly, smoothing out certain edges. It's the kind of effect that seems like a blessing in a society constantly talking about frazzled nerves, overwrought ladies, and high-strung children. So when a company decides to put lithium into a soft drink, regulators don't slam their fist on the table and shout, "You can do that." The reality is much less dramatic and far more unsettling. Nobody reacts strongly enough. Oversight bodies are still trying to define what counts as medicine, what counts as food, and what falls into the murky middle ground of health tonics and functional beverages. Into that confusion, a product like lithiated soda slides almost seamlessly. On the business side, the incentives are perfectly aligned for risks to be minimized and benefits exaggerated. A mood-smoothing ingredient in the drink doesn't just quench thirst, it promises to make you easier to live with, more pleasant, more agreeable. It's a relief not just for the drinker, but for the people around them. That's a powerful selling point, Behind closed doors, executives don't sit in smoky boardrooms plotting how to chemically hijack the brains of innocent children. It's more banal than that, more what will boost sales. What keeps people coming back? Then how do we subdue the masses? They see that nervousness, anxiety, and mood swings are part of everyday conversation. They see that people want quick, convenient solutions. They see that other products, patent medicines, tonics, elixirs are selling well precisely because they promise emotional ease. So they do what profit-driven systems almost always do. They follow the path of least resistance. If an ingredient isn't explicitly banned, if it can be spun as a benefit, if the potential side effects aren't commonly known or widely documented, then it becomes fair game. And once it's in the bottle, marketing takes over, smoothing out whatever rough edges remain. You can almost hear the meetings. It's coming, isn't it? Well, people want calm. It's used in medicine, so we can say it helps the nerves. It's part of modern science. People trust that now. We'll push the health angle. Labels are printed emphasizing refreshment and balance. Ads hint that this drink is perfect for tense days, restless kids, and overstimulated adults. The word lithium may appear at first, dressed up as a feature, a scientific flourish, but slowly, over time, mentions of it fade away. The drink remains. The story shifts. Regulators, meanwhile, are battling a tidal wave. Hundreds of products, claims, and concoctions stream onto the market. Some of them are obvious frauds. Some are borderline. Some are genuinely beneficial. The institutions tasked with sorting out which is which are underfunded, politically pressured, and caught between public demand for miracle cures and scientific uncertainty about long-term effects. When the first whispers appear that perhaps adding a psychiatric agent to a Trojan soda is not ideal, these concerns don't automatically trigger sweeping reforms. Instead, they become one more voice in the chorus of competing narratives. Companies insisting their products are safe, doctors divided in their opinions, consumers caught in the middle, unsure who to believe. The asymmetry is glaring. A medical journal might publish a cautious note about lithium's potential toxicity at higher doses, about the need for careful monitoring. That article will be read by a small circle of professionals. Meanwhile, advertisements about the soothing, uplifting, family-friendly virtues of a lithiated drink will be seen by millions in newspapers, on posters, and in store displays. One message whispers, the other shouts. Most people follow the louder one, and then there's the deeper ethical failure. The way children are folded into this without a second thought. Parents, trusting companies and regulators, pour the fizzy drink into little glasses and pass them across the table. They have no idea they're exposing their kids to a compound that, in later decades, will be treated with clinical seriousness and monitored like any powerful psychiatric medication. Nobody sits those parents down and explains dose, duration, or developmental risks. Nobody tells them, this is a drug that changes how the brain manages mood. It's all smoothed over under the language of tonics, nerve relief, and helpful refreshment. The companies say, implicitly, look, we can buy this, we can sell this, we can advertise this. If it were truly dangerous, surely someone would stop us. The regulators say, implicitly through inaction, we haven't stopped them, so it must not be urgent. The parents say, if it's in the store, it must be fine, and the children, who have no say at all, just drink. The ethical problem isn't just the lithium itself, it is the attitude behind it. The normalization of using unconsenting bodies, especially young ones, as test sites for profitable chemistry. It's the casual acceptance of emotional states as something to be silently adjusted from the outside, rather than understood, supported, or worked with. If this sounds familiar, it's because this pattern repeats in different forms throughout modern history. Radium in glow-in-the-dark products, cocaine in tonics, amphetamines in diet pills, nicotine targeting stressed workers and overwhelmed moms, sugar added to everything to keep people reaching for more. Each time, the same ingredients show up: bold marketing, uncertain science, slow regulation, and human vulnerability. Companies lean on the language of progress. Regulators struggle to keep up. Consumers assume that if something is everywhere, it must be safe. When you place lithium-laced soda into that broader pattern, it stops looking like a bizarre one-off and starts looking like a textbook example of how public health and profit can collide with ordinary people caught in the blast radius. Eventually, slowly, unevenly, the tide begins to turn. Doctors build better data. Cases of toxicity and strange side effects accumulate and can no longer be shrugged off as coincidence. Scientific understanding of lithium deepens. Its power as a psychiatric medication is recognized more clearly. And with that recognition comes a realization: this is not something that belongs in casual, unmeasured quantities inside a children's soft drink. Regulators, facing mounting evidence and changing norms, begin to act. Guidelines tighten. Certain ingredients are reclassified. Adding lithium to a beverage starts to look less like clever innovation and more like reckless overreach. Quietly, formulas are changed. The lithiated branding disappears. The drink remains, but the drug is gone. By the time the story fully settles, all that's left for most people is a brand with a sanitized history and a vague memory that it used to have something different in it. The ethical debate, the hesitation, the transitional confusion, all of that sinks beneath the surface of popular memory. But if you pause and stare at those bottles on the shelf in that earlier era, the weight of it hits you. A government that didn't say no soon enough. Companies that didn't ask if they should, only if they could. Doctors and scientists whose warnings were easy to ignore because they didn't fit neatly into an advertisement. Parents and children who trusted systems that hadn't fully earned that trust. The lesson isn't that the past was uniquely foolish and that we now are fully enlightened. The lesson cuts much closer to the bone. At any point in time, including now, there are likely products on our shelves, in our fridges, in our routines, that future generations will look back on with the same disbelief. You really put that in kids' bodies? They'll ask. You really trusted those labels, those ads, that science, at that stage? And the truth will be the same as it was with lithium and soda. People assumed that if something was sold everywhere, praised loudly, and not immediately catastrophic, it must be fine. In that sense, the story of lithium and lemon lime fizz isn't just about one drink or one decade. It's about how easily a society can turn its own population, especially its children, into accidental test subjects, not out of villainy, but out of convenience, trust, and a deeply human desire for quick relief. When every child in America was on lithium, it didn't feel like a horror story from the inside. It felt like purchasing a product, following the ad, trusting the shelves. That's what makes it so haunting, because if an entire nation can drift into something that drastic without intending to, the unsettling question isn't just, how could they? It's also, what are we drifting into right now without seeing it?
Imagine you're sitting in a cramped living room sometime in mid-century America. The curtains are thin, the furniture is worn, and the air feels heavy in that quiet, familiar way of an ordinary evening. On the coffee table, there's a glass bottle sweating in a metal tray of melting ice. The label is bright, cheerful, reassuring. You don't see a lab experiment. You see refreshment. You see normal. You also see kids. 2 of them, maybe 3, sprawled on the floor in front of the television. The older one is jittery, restless, bouncing between toys and channels and questions. The younger one is whining about a headache or a bad day at school. Their mother is exhausted, worn down from work, house chores, and the constant emotional noise that defines life with children. Their father may be home, may not be. Maybe there's tension, maybe there's just silence. But what there definitely is, sitting right within reach, is a bottle that promises calm. Not in those exact words, of course. The label talks about uplifting flavor, balanced nerves, refreshing relief. The ad she saw in the newspaper described it as a modern aid for tension or perfect for overwrought minds. Maybe there was even an image of a smiling, relaxed family, the kids sipping happily, the parents looking content and relieved. For the whole family, the slogan implied, so she reaches for it. She doesn't think she's medicating her children. She thinks she's giving them a treat that just so happens to help them feel better, to settle them down, to smooth out the edges of difficult days. It's no different in her mind than giving them a spoonful of some over-the-counter syrup that claims to help their cough and soothe irritability. This is what the culture has taught her. If something is sold openly, advertised proudly, and backed by modern science, it is safe enough to trust. That's where the real tragedy begins, not in a villain's lair or some sinister laboratory, but in these completely ordinary moments. A parent, tired and loving, passes a glass of fizzing lithium-laced soda to a child because she is trying to do right by them with the information she has been given. The kids drink it without hesitation. It tastes good. It's cold and sweet. It's associated with positive moments, holidays, treats, rewards, quiet evenings. Over time, these kids may grow up thinking of this drink as a comfort ritual. Stressed? Have one. Can't focus? Have one. Feeling down? Have one. It becomes woven into their emotional landscape in a way that goes far beyond flavor. That's what makes this era so haunting, the way pharmaceutical effects quietly fused with everyday habits, disguised as refreshments and health tonics. You're not just influencing taste buds. You're shaping, developing brains. No one is tracking those brains in a serious, long-term way. You won't find a clipboard standing in the corner, logging doses, monitoring behaviors, or noting subtle shifts. There's no doctor visiting regularly to ask, has your child been more sluggish lately, less expressive, more detached, more flat? Have there been changes in appetite, energy, sleep, or mood? There's just life happening. Some good days, some bad days, some calm moments, some meltdowns. All of it is blurred into the ordinary chaos of family existence. If you lifted the roof off 1,000 American homes and watched from above, you'd see the same scene repeating. Bottles opened, glasses poured, kids drinking without a second thought. And underneath that surface, something delicate is being tinkered with the way the brain handles stress, emotion, mood, impulse. Lithium, in the controlled context of a modern psychiatric setting, is treated with great respect. It's monitored, measured, checked with blood tests, watched for side effects. It can be life-changing for people with severe mood disorders. But that's with trained supervision, clear diagnosis, and a deep understanding that you are working with a powerful tool. Now contrast that with a child in 1950s America. No one has labeled them as a psychiatric patient. No one has sat them down and said, "This is medicine. It will affect how you feel." No one is taking blood levels or tracking their kidney function. They're just drinking soda. At parties, after school, with dinner, at the movies. Emotional modulation is happening, but it's happening without intention, without informed consent, and without a clear understanding of the long-term consequences. That lack of consent is the quiet core of the horror. It's not just that a mood-altering substance is present, that it's invisible in the minds of the people using it. The parent believes they're giving refreshment. The child believes they're drinking fun. But on a biological level, a very real substance is interacting with developing neural circuits, shifting neurochemical balances in ways no one is really measuring. If you've ever seen a child who seems distant, overly subdued, or just a little too flat, you know how easy it is to mistake that as good behavior. Parents and teachers often praise quietness, compliance, and emotional softness. A child who stops throwing tantrums and becomes calm might be labeled as maturing, finally settling down, or learning to behave. But what if part of that shift isn't maturity at all? What if part of it is an unrecognized drug effect? There is something deeply unsettling about the idea that a generation of kids could have been nudged away from their natural emotional rhythm by a chemical they never chose, never understood, and never had explained to them. The full range of childhood wild joy, volatile anger, goofy playfulness, anxious tears might have been dampened. Not by parenting alone, not by environment alone, but by a sweet, bubbly drink sitting in the fridge. Now step back from one family and think in terms of society. A culture that normalizes chemically smoothing out children as emotions without fully acknowledging that what it is doing begins to redefine what normal behavior looks like. If kids who are more subdued, more compliant, or less emotionally intense are subtly rewarded while more expressive, reactive kids are judged more harshly, you slowly tilt the definition of a good child in favor of a quieter nervous system. Lithium soda doesn't create this value system, but it can reinforce it. The drink becomes part of a larger pattern, using substances to manage discomfort rather than understanding it. If your child is irritable, instead of asking, are they overwhelmed, lonely, bored, misunderstood, arrived, the answer trends toward, give them something to settle them down. So what happens to those children as they become adults? Some may grow up never knowing their relationship with this drink went beyond taste. They might just remember that their parents always kept it around and that they loved it as a kid. Others might experience vague, chronic issues, fatigue, subtle cognitive changes, emotional blunting that no one ever connects to childhood exposure. Medicine at that time isn't set up to look backward at dietary chemicals as a mental health factor. Most doctors are focused on the present symptom, not the slow, cumulative influence of years of quietly dosed soda. And then there's the psychological legacy. Growing up in a culture where mood is managed from the outside without openly naming it teaches you something, that your internal state is something to be smoothed, fixed, adjusted, not explored and understood. That if you're too loud, too sad, too intense, there should be a product for that. A liquid, a pill, a something. In that sense, lithiation of childhood isn't just a physical experiment, it's a training in emotional outsourcing. A subtle message that when you're not okay, the solution is external, packaged and put. Now imagine one of those children decades later standing in a grocery store as an adult. By then, the formula has changed. The lithium is gone. Regulations have tightened. Science has advanced, and someone, somewhere in a lab coat, decided we can't keep doing this. But the adult doesn't know the full story. Maybe they heard a rumor. Maybe they saw an article years later. Maybe they stumble across a line in some documentary. Did you know this soda used to contain lithium? They pause. They think about all the times they drank it as a kid. They think about their siblings, their childhood moods, their family's emotional climate. They wonder how much was them and how much was chemistry, a question they can never fully answer. That's part of what makes this story so haunting. There is no neat way to trace all the outcomes. No clean line connecting this child drank this much lithium to this is how their life was altered. The experiment was diffuse, undocumented, and unintentional from the perspective of the families involved. But whether or not you can prove every effect, the ethical shape is still clear. Children were exposed to a psychiatric active compound not because a doctor carefully weighed risks and benefits for each child, but because a drink company wanted to sell a nerve tonic and a regulatory system wasn't ready to say no. No one explained anything to them. No one asked their permission. No one monitored them. They were just part of the market. And this is where the story edges closer to the present. We like to imagine that we've moved far beyond such casual mixing of mood and marketing. And yes, in some ways, we have. Regulations are tighter. Labels are stricter. The idea of openly lacing a children's soft drink with lithium today would provoke outrage. But the pattern of using food, drink, and over-the-counter substances to modulate feelings, especially in kids, hasn't disappeared. It has simply changed shape. Sugar spikes, caffeine boosts, energy drinks, ultra-processed comfort foods, marketed directly to children. These may not be classified as psychiatric medications, but they absolutely affect mood, focus, and behavior, stimulation, sedation, distraction. These are still being sold, still presented as harmless treats, still processed through the same basic system of trust. If it's on the shelf, it must be fine. The lithium story stands as a kind of ghost in the background of all this. A reminder of how easily a generation's bodies and brains can be swept into experiments they never consented to, simply because science, capitalism, and regulation were not moving at the same speed. So when you picture that mid-century living room, again the kids with their soda, the parent with their tired smile, try to feel the full weight of what's happening without anyone realizing it. They're not villains. They're not fools. They're just people trusting a system that hasn't earned that level of faith. The kids laugh, clink glasses, take another sip. The parent sits down, glad for a moment of peace. The television murmurs in the background. It all feels so normal. And maybe that the most chilling part of all, how easily something so profound can hide inside something so ordinary.
Picture a neighborhood in mid-century America, the kind of place that now exists mostly in fading photographs and nostalgic memory. Tree-lined streets, kids riding bikes without helmets, sprinklers ticking in front yards, milk bottles on porches, and screen doors slamming shut all summer long. On the surface, it looks peaceful, wholesome, and almost impossibly simple compared to today. But underneath that calm surface, something subtle and unsettling is happening, not in secret laboratories, not in hidden bunkers, but right out in the open, on grocery shelves and in glowing advertisements. A generation is quietly being nudged toward a new way of thinking about feelings, behavior, and what it means to be normal. And one of the most powerful teachers in that lesson isn't a parent, a priest, or a school teacher. It's a drink. Not a medicine bottle with warnings and dosage instructions, just a soda. Brightly labeled, sweet, fizzy, and marketed as refreshing, modern, and good for your nerves. A drink that says, without ever saying it directly, if you're tense, overwhelmed, anxious, or your kids are too much to handle, this will help. Lithium in a lab is treated like a serious mood stabilizing drug. Lithium in a soda bottle becomes something else entirely. A lifestyle choice, a habit, a flavor, a family ritual. That quiet shift from this is a powerful psychiatric substance to this is something you drink after dinner is where the deeper psychological impact begins. Because once mood-changing chemistry is wrapped in colorful branding and handed to children as casually as candy, the line between emotional experience and external control starts to blur. Without anyone formally announcing it, the culture slips into a new pattern. If your internal world feels too rough, you don't explore it. You don't ask what it means. You don't learn to sit with it, understand it, or grow through it. You smooth it. You soften it. You pour something on top of it. You can imagine a parent standing in the kitchen, staring at a child who is acting out crying, shouting, bouncing off the walls after a long, overstimulating day. The parent is overstimulated too. Maybe they've worked all day. Maybe they're lonely. Maybe their marriage is strained. Maybe the bills are stacked on the table. They don't have time for a deep psychological breakdown of what's going on with their child's nervous system. But they do have a bottle in the fridge. Come sit down, they say. Have something to drink. This will help you calm down. The child learns several lessons at once, without a single formal explanation. First, that their big emotions are a problem. Second, that they are too much for themselves, for others, for the environment around them. And third, that the way to deal with these too much feelings is not to understand them, but to mute them. This is where emotional outsourcing begins. Instead of building inner skills, naming feelings, understanding triggers, learning self-soothing, processing stress, the child is encouraged again and again to reach outward for relief. The drink itself becomes associated with regulation. I am overwhelmed gives I drink gives I feel different. They may not know why they feel different. They may not consciously link it to chemistry. They just know life feels a little easier after that glass. Repeat that pattern enough times, and it becomes a template for adulthood. What's really haunting is how small each step feels. No one says, let's build a society where emotions are problems to be chemically managed. Instead, they say things like, this helps with your nerves. This keeps you balanced. This soothes the tension. This is good for the whole family. Even the language is softened, wrapped in comfort. Words like nerves and tension feel gentler than panic, misery, or despair. They make it easier to sell the idea that something potent enough to affect brain chemistry can also be wholesome enough to serve to your children after school. Meanwhile, those children are forming their internal rules about human experience. If they're restless, instead of being guided to understand that restlessness, they're steered toward relief. If they're sad, rather than being allowed to feel and move through that sadness, they're quietly nudged toward balancing out. They're not learning what their emotions are trying to tell them. They're learning that the signal is the problem. Turn it down. Turn it off, dull it. So when they grow into adults and hit life's inevitable storms, heartbreak, job loss, anxiety, loneliness, they don't think, what is this feeling asking from me? They think, what can I take? What can I eat, drink, smoke, or swallow to not feel this so sharply. Lithium soda is just one early, dramatic example of a larger arc. A culture drifting into the habit of managing discomfort externally rather than developing the internal capacity to navigate it. And this isn't just an issue on the individual level. It shifts the emotional norms of a whole society. If you dampen the edges of a generation's emotional experience, even slightly, you change what typical looks like. Children who are softened, numb, or calmed with chemistry may cry less, rebel less, explode less. Adults may quietly approve. Kids today are so well behaved, they say. This drink really helps them settle. But what gets lost? Maybe the wild, full-bodied joy becomes more muted too. Maybe the burning outrage at injustice never fully ignites. Maybe the ability to tolerate emotional intensity your own or someone else's never properly develops. When you repeatedly teach a nervous system that it doesn't have to ride out discomfort, that it can always have something to take the edge off, you short-circuit the training that builds resilience. Imagine two different childhoods. In one, a kid has big feelings. They get overwhelmed, they cry loud, they tantrum, they worry, they get scared at night. It's exhausting for the adults around them, but those adults, however imperfectly, try to help the child understand what they're feeling. They name it. You're scared, you're angry, you're sad, you're frustrated. They model coping, taking deep breaths, walking it off, talking it out. The child learns over time. Feelings can be survived. They rise, they peak, they pass. In the other childhood, those same big feelings are met with something external over and over. Here, drink this, take this, eat this. The child does calm down, but they haven't actually learned how. All they know is that relief is something that comes from outside. They're not building an inner map. They're building dependency. Lithium-laced soda is just one specific form of that second childhood. There's also a deeper, quieter psychological consequence. The erosion of trust in your own experience. If, without explanation, the adults around you keep giving you something that changes how you feel, something called good, for your nerves, helpful, balanced, you may start to assume that your natural state on its own isn't quite right. That you, unadjusted, are somehow slightly off, too intense, too sensitive, too volatile, too much. Over time, that subtle message becomes a kind of background hum inside the mind. I am not okay as I am. I'm better when I'm altered. The tragedy is that no one sits you down and says this. It just seeps in through repetition. And then one day you're 35, unable to relax without a drink, unable to face mornings without caffeine, unable to fall asleep without some substance or distraction, and you don't quite know why. You just think, this is how I am. I need something to take the edge off. You may never trace that instinct back to a childhood where restlessness, sadness, or overwhelm were consistently met with an external fix, not a deeper understanding. From a distance, history makes it easy to see the lithium story as a bizarre mistake, something they did back then. But if you zoom in, the psychology hasn't gone away. The products change, the pattern didn't. Children are still handed things to change how they feel, often without a clear explanation. Still calmed with sugar spikes and screens, stimulated with caffeine, soothed with processed treats, distracted instead of understood. Still learning that the way to handle discomfort is not to get curious about it, but to reach for something immediately accessible, fast-acting, and external. Lithium soda is like a rough first draft of that mindset, written in big, reckless letters. If you look at it closely, it forces uncomfortable questions. How much of our idea of normal emotional behavior is culturally engineered? How often do we reward emotional compliance instead of emotional authenticity? How many substances legal, normalized, advertised shape our moods far more than we acknowledge? And maybe the toughest question of all, how many quiet experiments are we still running on ourselves and our children without realizing it, simply because something is common, convenient, and on the shelf? In the middle of all that, a single image lingers. A child, legs swinging from a kitchen chair, sipping a drink that tastes like sweetness and safety, never knowing that inside that ordinary ritual is a tiny, invisible message being delivered over and over. When you don't feel okay, don't look inward, look outward. There should always be something you can consume to fix you. That's the real legacy of a society that casually doses kids through something as innocent looking as soda. Not just the chemical traces in their bodies, but the quiet rewriting of their relationship with their own feelings. A culture that teaches children to outsource their emotions doesn't just create customers, it creates adults who feel lost without an external fix. And no warning label is big enough to capture what that really costs. Imagine an ordinary American living room in the 1950s. A heavy television set sits in the corner like a new household altar, broadcasting crisp black and white worlds into people's homes. The jingles are catchy, the hosts are cheerful, and the commercials glide by with smiling faces, perfect hair, and voices that seem absolutely certain of themselves. They don't suggest, they don't speculate, they tell you what's good for you. In this world, trust works very differently than it does today. There are fewer channels, fewer brands, fewer competing narratives. When something appears on TV or in a glossy magazine, most people don't respond with skepticism. They don't immediately wonder about hidden motives, lobbyists, and long-term side effects. There's a simpler, more fragile assumption at work. If it's being advertised like this, it must be safe. If it weren't, they wouldn't be allowed to sell it. That mindset creates fertile ground for something deeper than just clever marketing. It creates a whole emotional climate where science, commerce, and authority blur together into a single reassuring voice. Now drop lithium into that environment not as a prescription, not as a carefully monitored treatment, but as an ingredient quietly blended into a fizzy drink and wrapped in fun, reassuring language. To modern eyes, that seems outrageous, even sinister, but to many people living through it, it didn't feel like a horror story. It felt like progress. This is where the cultural and emotional weight of the situation really settles in. To understand how people were psychologically primed to accept the lithium-laced soda, you have to enter their worldview. The early and mid-20th century were drenched in a kind of optimism about chemistry. New synthetic materials, new medicines, new cleaning products, new foods, everything modern was infused with a kind of shimmering promise. Science would solve discomfort, disorder, and inconvenience. If something was scientifically formulated, that phrase alone was almost like a blessing. And so a drink that promised to lift your mood or soothe your nerves didn't feel like planning with dynamite. It felt like the future. If you picked up a bottle at a corner store and saw phrases like refreshing, soothing, or good for your nerves, you wouldn't necessarily see a red flag. You'd see reassurance. That's what makes this kind of story unsettling. The danger didn't come wrapped in skulls and crossbones. It came wrapped in smiles and slogans. But marketing doesn't just describe a product, it also shapes beliefs. If a drink is advertised as calming, people begin to expect calm from it. If it's advertised as balancing, they begin to interpret their post-drink state through that lens. Even subtle physical changes, relaxing a bit after a long day, feeling more settled after a meal, get folded into a narrative. This helps me. This works. This makes me better. That's how marketing seeps into identity. A parent might walk into a store already thinking, my nerves are shot, or the kids are getting harder to handle. They see an ad promising ease, relief, equilibrium, and they don't just see a beverage. They see a small, affordable tool to become the calmer version of themselves they want to be. They're not chasing intoxication, they're chasing competence. This is a crucial psychological note. Most people don't adopt these products thinking, let me numb myself. They think, let me become the version of myself I'm supposed to be. Let me be easier to live with. Let me be less of a burden. The same goes for parents and their children. If the culture around them subtly reinforces the idea that a good child is quiet, compliant, emotionally even, and manageable, then anything that nudges a child toward those traits will feel like a good idea. A child who runs hot big feelings, big reactions, big swings might be described as difficult, nervy, or high-strung in that environment. Giving them something advertised as calming doesn't feel like drugging them. It feels like helping them become more acceptable. That's how social pressure fuses with advertising. The message isn't just drink this. The unspoken message becomes, this is how you make yourself and your kids easier to love and easier to live with. Over time, the drink is no longer just a drink. It becomes part of the emotional toolkit of a household. You can imagine rituals forming almost without anyone noticing. After dinner, when the house is loud and everyone's tired and irritable, the bottle comes out. Before a stressful event, a family gathering, a test, a long car ride, someone says, have a little, it will help your nerves. The drink becomes woven into specific emotional contexts: stress, anticipation, worry, social performance. The brain begins to link those states with their solution. That link is the real psychological hook. The more often you repeat the pattern, uncomfortable feeling gives specific product, gives perceived relief, the more deeply it embeds. Eventually, just feeling that discomfort is enough to make your mind reach for the product automatically. The ad doesn't even have to speak to you anymore. The message has moved inside. What if I run out? What if they stop selling it? What if I don't feel like myself without it? Now we've recrossed the line from casual consumption into emotional dependence, and not necessarily chemical addiction in the strict sense, but a deep belief that you can't handle your own inner world unaided. Once that belief lodges itself in the culture, products like this don't even need aggressive marketing. The culture itself carries the ad forward. People talk to each other. Neighbors recommend it. Families pass the habit down. My parents always had this in the house when we were stressed. It really helped. The story replicates itself over dinner tables and back fences. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. When an entire community normalizes using a mood-shaping beverage as part of everyday life, it becomes much harder to see it as unusual. If you're surrounded by people who drink it, serve it, and praise it, you're unlikely to step back and ask, wait, why is a psychiatric level substance part of our casual grocery list? Conformity comes with its own quiet pressure. If everyone else seems more relaxed, more balanced, more composed, and they rate all using the same thing, you may feel like you rate the odd one out. if you question it. Psychological discomfort shifts from this drink might be unsafe to maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should just go alone like everyone else. So the marketing doesn't work in a vacuum. It works in synergy with three powerful forces: trust in science, trust in authority, and fear of standing out. There is another level to the way this story warped the cultural conversation about what emotions mean. If you live in a world where a nerve-calming soda is on the table, you're way less likely to see intense emotion as something to explore, or as a signal that something in the environment needs to change. Instead, you're subtly guided to see intense emotion as a technical problem to be managed, like a faulty wire or a squeaky hinge. Anxious, stressed, overwhelmed. Instead of asking, what in my life is making me feel this way, you're nudged toward, what can I take so I don't feel this way? The focus shifts from changing circumstances or building skills to changing your state. The consequences of that shift aren't just medical or historical. They're spiritual in a small, everyday way. You lose faith in your own ability to respond to life with raw, honest feeling. You begin to suspect that your unfiltered emotional self isn't quite compatible with what the world expects. Meanwhile, the companies selling these products are rewarded not just with money, but with something softer and more insidious: gratitude. People say, this really helps me. I don't know what I'd do without it. It keeps me steady. The brand becomes associated with comfort and stability. The fact that it's a commercial product fades into the background. It starts to feel almost like a benevolent presence in the home, a kind of modern cure-all blessed by science. And that's the psychological trick. When the product earns your gratitude, it becomes much harder to question its right to exist. If you zoom out, what you see isn't just one strange chapter in beverage history. You see a pattern that the modern world still hasn't fully escaped: the merging of emotional life with consumerism. Feel sad. There's something for that. Feel stressed. Something for that too. Distracted, tired, lonely, restless. There are aisles and apps and algorithms waiting to offer you something to modify that feeling rather than understand it. Looking back at a lithium spiked soda, it's tempting to feel superior to say, we'd never fall for that now. But the real sting of this story is that the psychology behind it is still very much alive. The tools have changed, the mindset hasn't. A society eager for quick relief will always be vulnerable to any product that promises to smooth the rough edges of being human. In that sense, the unsettling part isn't just that children once drank lithium out of glass bottles. It is that they were quietly trained to believe that every uncomfortable feeling should have a ready-made solution that you can buy. The labels can be rewritten, the ingredients can be swapped, the science can rebrand itself. But as long as that belief remains the belief that your inner world is a problem to be fixed by something outside of you, the spirit of that era and its soda bottles never really goes away.